an incredibly popular 45 million downloads and counting, 100 countries, 1.5 million paying subscribers, focused on what was originally a weight loss app, but has since expanded into preventative health, defined more broadly.
In an age of medically assisted weight loss, this concept of holistic health was kind of deep in Noom's roots, but it needed an answer for the GLP-1. And the solution that we built was really twofold. One was building the best GLP-1 companion. Then the second was to build easy and affordable access to the GLP-1 medication itself. So that it was all part of one integrated program, the behavior and the medication. And that has taken off. More than 60% of our revenue now comes from medicated programs.
Welcome to Analyzing Healthcare podcast, brought to you by SCALE Community. SCALE Community is a global healthcare-focused member network where healthcare leaders come to connect, learn, share ideas, and shape what's next in our evolving healthcare landscape. To take advantage of all that SCALE Community has to offer, from expansive content to virtual and in-person events, to interactive peer networking opportunities, and more, check out SCALE Community at www.scale-community.com. Membership options range from free to paid, so if you enjoyed today's discussion, please take a moment to sign up for your preferred membership level.
I wanted to introduce Geoff Cook, the CEO of Noom, to the latest edition of Scale Community's Analyzing Healthcare podcast, which you can find on Spotify and Apple. Geoff, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So tell us about Noom. The quick research that I did is an incredibly popular 45 million downloads and counting, 100 countries, 1.5 million paying subscribers, focused on what was originally a weight loss app, but has since expanded into preventative health, defined more broadly. That's a very simplistic description of Noom. I'm looking for you to enlighten our audience on why this offering has been so popular in the marketplace.
Sure. I joined. Well, first of all, let's say what Noom is. It's a platform for preventive health. It's a longevity solution. The mission of Noom is empower everyone everywhere to live better every day. And that's key, that everyday bit. We want to help everyone everywhere live better longer every day. And so we come at longevity through this lens of vitality today. And so rather than kind of market abstractions about health span and potentially extending your lifespan, our aim is to help you feel better today. And many of those things that can improve your health today are going to extend your life tomorrow. And so that's really where we focus. I joined Noom a little more now than two years ago. At the time, as you mentioned, Noom, very popular application, but it was being disrupted by GLP-1 medications. Noom is known for its behavior change platform. Especially that was true 2 years ago. And so in an age of medically assisted weight loss, Noom didn't really have a medically assisted weight loss solution. And so I came in having spent prior to this 18 years building out live streaming video platform of a company I founded called the Meat Group, took public, and listed on NASDAQ, sold it. When I came into Noom, I really liked this huge brand. So many people knew it, especially among the women in my life, as I found out as I was contemplating the role. And to be able to take that kind of really interesting brand that really stood for something like whole person health, right? One of the early slogans was, it's not a diet, it's a mindset. And so this concept of holistic health was kind of deep in Noom's roots, but it needed an answer for the GLP-1. And the solution that we built was really twofold. One was building the best GLP-1 companion. GLP-1 says right on the label to be used as an adjunct to diet and exercise. And by GLP-1, of course, I'm referring to medications like Mounjaro, Ozempic, Wegovy. And the GLP-1 companion is basically the habits program to help you have enough protein intake, have enough resistance training to deal with the potential risk of muscle wastage, sarcopenic obesity while on a GLP-1. So building that behavior change platform for the GLP-1 was critical. And that was the first thing we did. Then the second was to build an easy and affordable access to the GLP-1 medication itself. So that it was all part of one integrated program, the behavior and the medication. And that has taken off. More than 60% of our revenue now comes from medicated programs, not just GLP-1, but we launched an HRT program as well. We have some other medically assisted weight loss programs beyond GLP-1. But that was the key insight. And so, it's been a dramatic transformation of the company. We continue to emphasize habits and behavior change, really above all, but we do it in the context of the GLP-1.
Has that brought you from direct to consumer to more of a payer reimbursed business model? Medical necessity, clinically proven? Does it make you more of a medical science business, a clinical care business? Or do you still feel like in your bones, this is direct to consumer orientated?
Yeah, in our bones, we're direct to consumer. At the same time, we have a pretty considerable enterprise business today where we work with a couple of the, actually a half dozen major health plans, 100 of the major employers, a number of the Blues plans. So that is a part of the business, health, we call it, that has been growing nicely over the last 3 years since it started. But in its bones, Noom's a consumer offering, and I think it will be that way 2 years from now. But on the enterprise side, it's actually helped by that consumer strength. So one of the key reasons an employer or a plan pick Noom for their solution, there are other enterprise solutions, it's because the activation rates are so high because the participants have already heard of Noom, right? So instead of hearing they have access to X, which they may never have heard of, and that might only get 3 or 4% engagement, getting Noom free through your employer or through your health plan, you'll get something like 20, 25% engagement. That's kind of the reason for Noom to have an enterprise business. And we've been investing in that quite a bit. But at the same time, it's really the consumer business is even growing faster.
It's a wonderful case study in not fighting the wave, but surfing it. In this case, GLP-1 being the wave. And certainly take the point that GLP-1 on its own doesn't solve for everything, does it? In fact,
it's a really important point, right?
Like creates certain problems on its own, new problems.
Absolutely.
Like muscle atrophy.
I mean, also people don't stay on it, right? So, 4 out of 5 people will be off of it after 24 months, 2 out of 3 in the first year, right? And so GLP-1 is a tool in a health journey. It's not the full solution. It can't be if people stop using it so quickly. And so, the trick for Noom was really to keep its focus on the behavior change, on the micro habits, while bringing in the medication. And that's one of the things we like so much about the medication, especially in the early days of using Noom, because it was always the case that with Noom, if you had early weight loss in the first month, let's say, you're going to be more likely to be healthier and still using Noom at month 4, let's say. Well, the GLP-1, when you take it alongside a healthy habits program, you're going to get this reliable early success, scale victories, so to speak, the weight loss scale. You're seeing the effort pay off, and you're attributing that to both the medication, but also to your habits. If you recently are working to move more and eat better. And so that basically begins a virtuous cycle where kind of motivation builds because you're seeing that those actions are having results. Those actions having results drives motivation. That motivation drives action. So you get this virtuous cycle. And we see it. A GLP-1 companion engagement is actually higher than our habits-only program engagement.
How do the average customer duration timelines, average age of customer compare between GLP-1 and Noom? So let me put that in very simple terms. The average Noom user stays with you for life, stays with you 5 years. The average GLP user is 12 to 24 months, or are they symmetrical?
GLP-1 side is I want to say about 30% longer. It's materially longer. It's not like it's 3 times as long, but it's materially longer. That engagement actually shows up in the first month. You can see that they're also the more engaged, at day 30. Hopefully more than 30% of folks are actually active on day 30, which, I come from a social media world with tens of millions of monthly active users. 30% day 30 engagement, end day engagement is actually phenomenal. And we've seen, we launched the GLP-1 companion, then we launched an update to it very recently that added a bunch of kind of interesting gamification. And we saw a healthy double-digit % increase in day 30 retention, which is actually—
Is the gamification creating like a group cohort of Noom GLP-1 users and ranking who's doing how well amongst that cohort? Does it look like that?
We want to get there. So the social component is something that's really important for us actually in 2026. The gamification is really around a virtual currency incentive that we added to the program in August called Seeds. And so you actually earn seeds when you engage in logging healthy meals, you hit your step goal, you do our mindful art break, you get seeds. You could redeem seeds for gift cards. You could redeem seeds. You could donate them to charities, real world charities. So that's part of the gamification. Now we also have concepts of streaks and reviving a streak if you lose it. So that's another kind of aspect. But then also just the sense of having a step goal, is itself kind of a gamification element. So those are some of the more interesting ones we've had.
What is your expectation for an average duration of usage for a Noom customer or a Noom user? What is the runoff?
We don't generally talk publicly about LTVs, but I would say like what we're really aiming for is meaningful health outcomes. And so basically what that tends to mean is 5+% body weight loss. That's traditionally what it has meant. We are the newest version of Noom, which launched in August, is really a longevity companion on the free side. So it's basically a free longevity companion, and you can upsell into the healthy weight, which is more of a weight loss companion, or the GLP-1 program. But on the longevity side, it's really being designed for people who are of all BMIs, diverse BMIs. So it's not just about weight loss, it's about living better, longer every day. And so from that lens, we are contemplating different ways of measuring those types of health outcomes. Can you help them move more? Can you help them increase their share of green foods, healthier foods? We're looking at diagnostic testing. Can you improve their blood work? So I think that will evolve over time.
It's an amazing category, and you sort of think of this space, preventative care, underinvested in this country and across the world for decades. Consumer patient front-facing apps, healthcare apps, coming on strong now. Consumer controlled treatment, putting consumers in the driving seat. This is a theme that we've wanted for decades. And then bending the cost curve of healthcare, also something that is critical to our industry. So it feels like you're occupying a very rich space, much needed on a macro social level, much needed on an individual consumer level, and highly complementary to treatment of actual care as opposed to preventative care, the clinical side that we've grown up with, right? Primary care practice, and obviously the high acuity facilities that are out there, the hospitals themselves. I think we as an industry, the healthcare industry, try to occupy this space from that vantage point, from that starting point. And I think that the best attempt that we came up with is value-based care, which tried to superimpose preventative care treatment plans that were incentivized to try to bend the cost curve. I look at your approach, which is consumer electronic driven, widely adopted, narrowly focused, right? It's not like you're showing up with a wide portfolio of primary care facilities with a large clinical staff and then an array of specialties that you can solve for too. You're not providing cardiology treatment. You are very much focused on consumer adoption of preventative behavior patterns. And it does feel like if I had to bet, which of those two approaches would likely generate more usage, more adoption from a larger cohort of consumer/patients and an aggregate much larger amount of change in behavior, I would bet on you versus primary care groups trying to do this effectively. I love a portfolio approach to difficult problems because you never know until you try what's going to work. But it does appear like it's a very timely opportunity for groups like Noom to take full advantage of this gap. What are your thoughts on what you're doing for preventative care versus large primary care groups that are following a value-based care model? Are you looking over your shoulder at their treatment plans? Do you see them as sort of unrelated? I know they're heavily incentivized to focus on things like hospital admission and readmission.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that they're tracking the latest weight of a given consumer/patient from Monday through Monday.
Yeah.
So it is interesting to compare different parallel paths here.
Right. I mean, generally, primary care visit rates are down pretty significantly over the last decade or so across the population, right? So, primary care, at least in its current form, is becoming seemingly less popular and clearly was not helpful in preventing at least the chronic disease epidemics that we have. So at the same time, primary care is incredibly important to society, and everyone should see their primary care physician. But the reality is those physicians tend to be pretty busy with a full book, and they tend to place a lot of their time on the folks who are coming in frequently, maybe with blood work every 3 months, managing a chronic condition. So someone who walks in with a 5.5 or 5.6 A1C and looks generally fit, they're going to say, well, great, keep doing what you're doing, see you next year. And that's missing a lot of the opportunity for improving that person's health, right? Because 5.5, 5.6 A1C is certainly up there, creeping up against pre-diabetes levels, even if it's considered in range. Various studies suggest that even every half point decrease in A1C reduces coronary heart disease by more than 20%. And so if you reframe this from how can I help you kind of avoid chronic disease to how can I help you achieve optimal health, whatever that might mean for you. I think that's really where preventive care is going. It's more proactive. It's patient led. They're demanding great customer service because they're often paying with cash. It's often cash pay, and so you're seeing this model of cash pay care kind of blossom because there's just no great way of getting that from kind of the traditional healthcare system.
Right, technology being what it is, it's really almost like a perfect conduit through which to deliver something that's been missing, which is stochastic, real-time, recurring oversight, coaching, assistance, which no primary care physician can provide 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And every primary care physician has their way of interacting. Superimpose on that AI. So now you're augmenting the level of interaction with ever higher degrees of intelligence, and superimpose on that a consumer base that is rapidly becoming ever more intelligent. By the way, AI helping that process along as well. What used to be a massive knowledge gap between a blood test provided or recommended by a primary care physician, the results of the blood test, and a primary care physician summarizing the results, is now an in-depth audit provided by an LLM model directly in response to a plethora of questions by a patient that then causes the patient to reach out to Noom to say, hey, I have a problem here and I need 24-hour-a-day monitoring. So it's a wonderful cycle that keeps on, I think, bringing more and more consumers to you.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, are you seeing that growth from year to year?
Absolutely. I mean, the company is firing on all cylinders right now. I mean, the mega trend that we see is really this convergence of diagnostics, this testing, blood testing is getting cheaper and cheaper. It's becoming more and more commodity. At the same time, the number of tests are increasing. So you have diagnostics, you have convenient access to clinical care, right? Like that. That's another kind of key trend. But you have diagnostics converging with convenient care, and then you have that converging with lifestyle support. And so an example of this is, you think of Whoop and maybe Aura in lifestyle support. You probably might think of Noom. Whoop and Aura are wearables, but you saw each of them launch blood tests. Yeah, me too. I have the Whoop on. But you see diagnostics kind of blending with Whoop and Aura now. And then you see Hims, of course, recently launched diagnostics and talk about the importance of habits, at least. Noom has a significant care business, very interested in diagnostics. So I think multiple of the kind of the most interesting players in the space are probably all seeing the world pretty similarly. And it is generally all through this lens of AI, because how could you possibly, to your point, make sense of 100 different biomarkers and all of your wearable data, your
It really is the
clinical...
last shoe to drop. You couldn't get there 5 years ago.
Exactly.
So Chat GPT is really the door through which all these preventative care apps need to have walked through.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think you're going to see, and you do see, like, every significant player in this space having AI as a critical aspect of what they do. We've been using it in our coaching interactions to help the coach make the right decision. We have this no empty boxes concept where we should, as you might expect, have an LLM that kind of looks at all of the data from the member and is suggesting to the coach something, and then that coach can decide and edit that. But then we also leverage AI to even do things like transdermal optical imaging using the smartphone camera. You simply look at the smartphone camera for 30 seconds and it will read the blood flow in your face and predict various biomarkers like heart rate, biological age, kind of a litany of interesting kind of screening indicators. And then from there, that might lead you to consider a blood test, or ideally a behavior change program, or maybe even a GLP-1.
So if you had to forecast going forward, I'll ask you 2 questions from a forecasting perspective. One is, does the rise of preventative care effective solutions, effective products like Noom, result in further curving of the cost curve? So we go from 17.5%, which we've been at for 15 plus years of GDP, down to 15, 12, 10%, because we're just not delivering a high volume of chronic disease into the marketplace. We're preempting it. And you're seeing a shift of spend into preventative care, which is far less expensive than high acuity chronic care. You're seeing a shift away from invasive procedures and into non-invasive behavioral change. Is that a fair prediction going forward? Or will we end up with plus, which is where we've typically been in healthcare?
Right.
Whatever you add ends up being an addition to what is already being spent. And the second question is, you've built really successful consumer-facing apps in the past and platforms like the Meet Group. And I'm reminded of innovators like MySpace that had very high expectations entering a new category with digital footprint solutions that were widely adopted, only to discover that the space lends itself to a single solution. Is there going to be a single winner in this space? And if so, will it be Noom?
Great question. So on the first one, I do think it's different this time, right? I think you're starting to see the obesity curve, which it could be kind of a proxy for the metric you're kind of thinking about.
It really is a proxy. It definitely is a proxy.
Right. We're starting to see that bend, which is great and clearly related to the rise of GLP-1. And that's while GLP-1s are still quite expensive. So as you imagine that price falling, as you get into the 2030s and some of the most effective GLP-1s become generic, it's hard to imagine that not continuing to bend down. So I do think you'll see that cost curve bend. We're, as far as the dynamics of, is this kind of a winner take all? It probably isn't winner take all. I'm not sure it's the same dynamics as a social network where you have such significant network effects. But I do think that at the end of the day, what differentiates Noom is, one, powerful, trusted brand. Two, and is that engaging application. And we think of it as we're trying to build the Duolingo for health, right? Duolingo famously takes a US population that isn't particularly known for its love of second languages and somehow creates an extremely valuable asset while providing an extremely useful service to people who might never have otherwise thought to engage in second language. And so how do you make health fun? How do you make it healthy habits stick by essentially making them fun? And that's a lot of what we think about. It could start to take on those winner take all dynamics as you bring social more into them. And that's partly why we're so excited about the social side. But I think, remains to be seen. But I do think there will only be so many scaled players, 5 years from now in preventive health. But I would guess there's more than one.
There is a social networking effect, which is interesting, which is in the dialogue. The corridor water bottle conversations taking place between peer group users. You see that with Whoop. What's your Whoop score? What's your Whoop score? So it is interesting how it manifests almost outside of the actual application itself, just in second derivative conversations amongst users. It becomes part of the lexicon. Did you Noom today? That the winner ends up occupying that seat without necessarily. It's the rewards of being the best in class, which I think is probably going to be a function of efficacy and execution, right? Execution in marketing, execution in strategic partnerships, execution in pricing. But ultimately, you get additional rewards that you didn't even bargain for. You become part of the lexicon.
Yeah. I mean, I think demographics will, there's going to be some solutions that speak to particular demographics. A lot of people with a Whoop are fit, not all, of course, but many are elite athletes, and that's, I think you see many of them doing that. I'm sure they're marketing to those people. And the way that Noom thinks about it is really, if you go to, as I've done recently, if you go to Hollywood, or everyone's not just on a GLP-1 or microdose of a GLP-1, they're on a half dozen, a peptide stack, Morellin, maybe tesamorelin, Penilan, right? They're on, just about everything it might seem. They might be spending thousands of dollars a month on proactive preventive health under some doctor's guidance that they probably heard about from other celebrity or influencer. That is, how do you take that's a model, but it's not a great model. That's right. Wait, well, what is Tom Cruise doing? I better do that. I mean, that's literally the mindset. And so, I think, how do you bring that? What does the target, as opposed to the Walmart, what does the target of longevity look like? I think that's what we want it to look like, what Noom is building. But you could imagine, even if you had the target, that maybe the upscale or the Nordstroms of that might look differently than maybe the Walmart of that, right? Like, so there may still be a spectrum, but the one we're building is essentially that mainstream.
Yep.
Bringing longevity medicine to the mainstream, like that's what we're after.
I feel like you are, a Gap who's just recognized couture in Paris and is modifying for everyday wear to bring back to the US. And so where you started, available for everyone. The democratization of best-in-class care is such a rich space to be on so many levels. On a moral level, it must be so rewarding for you to do this. Because one of the worst aspects of healthcare is how elitist it can be. I think it upsets all of us when we see pockets of great care, but only available to a select few. I think the democratization of GLP-1 will be very interesting. I want to focus on two risks with you that concern me, because if you haven't noticed, I really want Noom to be very successful. The more successful you are, the more the entire population of the US and the world will be, because you're in the business of making us healthy, sort of the antithesis to Coca-Cola. God bless Coca-Cola, who was in the business of making us happy. But I don't think anyone could argue in hindsight that they were in the business of making us healthy. So you're in the business of making us healthy. So we all really want you to be successful. It's a good thing. But so two risks that we all face together as you build this that I'm aware of. One is regulation. If carried out well, a great aid to you over time. If mismanaged, possibly catastrophic. Right? And it only takes one or two bad case studies. You have a consumer who relied on Noom and then went and did something and got the wrong outcome. And the other is non-interoperable data, the siloed data scaling that we've grown up with in healthcare, where no matter how big Noom gets, nobody else wants to talk to it. You're not interacting with large health systems. You're not interacting with EMRs. You're not getting access to public healthcare data and being able to cross-reference what you have to offer, what you've learned on these same consumers that are ultimately the same patients, in order to further optimize treatment, preventative and post-care or episodic care, right? All coalescing around the same patient. And so this rigidity of my system doesn't speak to your system remains very much part of what we live with every day. So as you think about those two risks, do either of them concern you? Do you think about them? Am I exaggerating their potential threat to you?
So I think we definitely think about both of those areas. On the regulatory side, I think what we've seen from the Trump administration is this MAHA, Make America Healthy Again initiative. Recently, there was a summit attended by many academic institutions. Noom was there. Many others were there, a MAHA summit. And it was clear that longevity and healthy aging was actually quite important to that movement. And so one of the examples of that would be, big pharma companies were not represented on stage. Commissioner Makary, of course, FDA commissioner was, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., even the vice president were on stage. But the people who were on stage were companies like Brian Johnson and his latest longevity company, interestingly, different 503A and 503B compounding players kind of leading this personalization charge. So I think Noom does have a lobbyist. There's others much larger than us doing probably much more than that, but it's an area that we do try to keep close to. But at least I think there's reason for some optimism that people are talking about the right thing. Like there's this sense that the GLP-1 is important, but it's really just a tool, and it has to be priced accessibly, and it can't be only a GLP-1. Like the pure medicalization of kind of everyday living is anathema to group, but at the same time, improving health is important. And so it has a role to play. On the second bit, Noom was one of only 60 companies recently at the White House this summer signing a data interoperability pledge. This was an initiative led by CMS. And I think you're going to actually see real movement. Like we continue to be very involved in that pledge. You're going to see that basically is a kill the clipboard type of initiative where CMS creates kind of a handshake to make it secure in order to access and import records to whoever your provider might be. So imagine you come into Noom and you enter, a credential, and we get your health data. And then any data that we create decorates that record so your primary care doctor can get access to that data.
Oh my God. The actual results of true interoperability are going to be loved by all end users. The question is, does Epic, that has built a moat around its data for decades?
They're one of the signatories of that pledge.
Yes. It comes down to how strong is the commitment behind that pledge.
Right. Exactly.
A friend of mine, Seema, who used to run CMS back in the 2016-2020 period, this was like her great focus. So she's enjoying this time now that she's head of healthcare at Oracle, who's also should be a direct beneficiary of the interoperability. But you agree with me, some very large players will secretly love and appreciate the movement towards sharing, and some will invariably try to slow things down.
That's probably right. Yeah.
And we
certainly welcome it at Noom, but I could imagine other perspectives too.
Okay, so the other risk, the regulatory risk, is not something that you're necessarily overly cautious with now. And given that it's not too constrictive right now, achieving scale will be enlightening and self-realizing for future regulators. It's much harder to put the horse back in the stable once it's already bolted, which is encouraging for all of us.
Yeah, I think if you're helping a large number of people and you can demonstrate that, that's always going to matter, right, in those sorts of conversations. And so you're absolutely right that a lot of this becomes a scale question.
One last question I have for you, and I really appreciate your time this afternoon. I've definitely learned a lot. What a fascinating, less exciting space. I love revolutions in healthcare, and here's another one that has huge implications for all of us. GLP-1's price comes down by 50, 75, 80%. Does the average tenure of usership increase proportionally? Is it mostly budget that's pushing users off GLP-1 within 12 to 24 months? Or there's a different contributing factor that's driving sort of the relatively contained time period per user? Is it muscle decay? Is it gastrointestinal issues? What else is driving the
I mean, in our data, we see price is number one.
Customer attrition, I guess, is the business term that I would use for it.
Yeah. So price is number one, and side effect profile is number two. Right. Those are the two major reasons. Both that someone might not start a GLP-1, fear of either of those things, and then they're the two biggest reasons you might stop. So to your question, no, I don't believe if price fell by let's say 90%, that people would stay on it 10 times as long. People would stay on it longer. Undoubtedly, humans they're not particularly adherent to statins, which are cheap and effective. And so I think you'll start to see GLP-1 approach, that level of persistence as the price falls. There is something special about GLP-1 as a class, because when you start gaining weight, you see it in the mirror and on the scale in a way that you don't get that same regular insight and feedback from your statin, right? And so our view is that people will kind of come on and off the medication over time, just because that's what kind of humans do with medication, but this
high
is one
adoption in January, low adoption in June.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I won't take that injection in November and December because I really want to enjoy my holidays, and food is important to maybe that particular person's sense of that. But yeah, on the other side of January 1st, I absolutely will start again. That sort of thing.
That is interesting. Seasonal GLP-1 usage, sort of the direction that we're heading. Very interesting.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciated your gap analogy. I've never heard it put that way before. I think I'm going to use that. That beats the target analogy.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your time today. Thank you for your wisdom and your experience. And we wish you the best of luck with Noom.
Thank you for joining us on Analyzing Healthcare. Stay informed and stay inspired. Don't forget to subscribe and visit scale-community.com to become a Scale Community member. Until next time, keep exploring the ideas that shape our healthcare systems.